Welcome to the latest edition of Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures for Desporto restaurants, where Italy comes alive on a plate. You can find them at Williamstown, Yarraville, Essendon, right near Windy Hill, very famous football ground that our two guests know a fair bit about. The kiosk in Williamstown Beach, Gelato Desporto, and Bottega Desporto, a bar in Yarraville. And our guests today, an old mate of mine, he used to be both great old mates of mine. He used to be on the board at the Footscray Football Club, now Western Bulldogs, long-time Bulldog supporter. In fact, his whole family are. They bleed red, white and blue. Great to catch up with Hayden Stevens. Welcome, Hayden. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Dan, for having me. And
the man that calls himself the Arden St Angler, got to know him in Perth, mad keen Kangaroos supporter. He's a bit like me. He's a negative supporter. I'm a negative Bulldog supporter. The great Scotty Coghlan. Welcome, Scotty. Good to have you with us as well.
Good to be with you. This is an ambush, though, isn't it? Two Bulldogs men against the North. It's like when Josh Bruce kicked 10 on the Kangaroos that time.
That was probably the best game you ever played.
Still got sour. Hey, Scotty, you've still got sour grapes for that. Hey, Scotty, you've still got sour grapes for that 1985 final, the G.
I've got lots of sour grapes, trust me.
Single best game of Doug Hawkins I've seen played.
Yeah, it was.
He could play, dude.
I always remember Simon Beasley telling a great story about that when he was looking for his 100th. And he just said to Hawk, left hit, left hit, left hit. Where did Hawk hit him on the left, running around the Great Southern Stand side, right on the left side of his chest. It was, that was the best game I've ever seen Dougie play. The only BNF he won, though, which was surprising considering how good he was. That was 41 years ago, gentlemen. So let's start. Why don't we start with the Kangaroos, and we can just have a bit of a chat about them. I thought a few weeks ago they were coming, but they needed to start beating some good sides. But on the weekend, Scotty, it's been a little while since they've conceded 10 goals in a quarter, but they were blitzed. They were horrible, weren't they? Gone back to their bad old days.
There's been a lot of talk about how well we are supposedly going, but I must admit I'm not one that really fell for it because we beat the sides that are around us, and that was it. We haven't claimed a scalp. And we had an opportunity. We haven't won in Adelaide since 2011 and haven't beaten the Crows there since 2003. So it was a big opportunity. And the Crows weren't exactly flying, had half their forward line out. And yet they just tore us apart in the second quarter, 117 possessions to 43. I still think North have got a long way to go. There is talent there. There's definitely, there's been a number of high draft picks that we could talk about that are there that will form the nucleus going forward. But there's still a lot of dead weight there, and the back line is a schmozzle, really. It's a very, very basic back line, doesn't have any genuine class, really. Not a lot of ball carriers. Teams set up off half back nowadays. It's a turnover game. You get the ball, you run it down the other end, and we just don't have the players that can do it. So, I mean, we've improved a bit, but I still think there's a long way to go. And when you get outscored 10 goals to nothing, that probably suggests that. And until they start beating some decent teams, that's where they're at. They haven't beaten a finals side since 2022 when they beat Richmond.
Gee, wow. That's a big stat, isn't it? Charlie Compton's a good player, though, isn't he? A centre half back. You need to build your back line around him and maybe try and get another couple of years out of Luke Parker.
He's an interesting cat, Compton, because he's as brave as the day is long. He'll fly at everything, sometimes ill-advisedly. He's not a great user of the ball. He's one of the guys who tends to turn over by foot. Pretty good as an intercept player. He will fly for everything in his area, but not necessarily that great one-on-one. So he's a decent player. He'll be part of the way forward, but they really are screaming out for a real quality tall defender. And as I said, particularly some good, skillful running halfbacks, of which hopefully Riley Hardiman, who hasn't been getting a game in recent weeks, the ex-Swan, hopefully he will be one of those.
Yeah, why hasn't he been getting a game? Why hasn't he been getting a game? He was
pre-season and then has been brought back very slowly. I thought he would play last weekend because he's been playing really well in the VFL, but for whatever reason, we didn't go that way.
Well, coaches do have their favourites. Hayden, how do you reckon North Melbourne are going? As I said to Scotty, I thought they've improved, but obviously not yet. I mean, their back line's a bit like the Bulldogs' back line, which we'll get to shortly. But the North Melbourne backline is a real cause for concern. And obviously the game has caught up with a former player at the Bulldogs in Caleb Daniel, hasn't it?
It has a bit. The game has not just caught up with him, but I think it's past him. You know, the stand rule and the pace we're seeing now on the ball just makes it a bit harder for Caleb and players of that era. I reckon you're a bit harsh, both of you. I actually have seen a lot of improvement. I think with the young list that they've got, you've got to expect performance that's not always consistent. And when you take last year, and to Scotty, I know you're frustrated by just beating the teams around you, but go back a year or two and you're not even doing that. And so you've got to take these kind of signals of improvement and stick to the course. You know, I actually think that they've got now a centre line that you can build a team around. Cobden, you mentioned. I mean, I don't know, Dan, if we were at the recruiting table, I'd be prepared to offer a lot for him for what we need now at the Doggies. So you've got something there to create a bit of a spine. And I think Larky is probably not hitting his straps like he's done in the prior year, but we know the talent he is. So I actually think that there's optimism. I think the bigger question for North Melbourne is, again, come recruiting time, is whether they top up with experience and try and kind of claw their way up their ladder with a more experienced set of players, or alternatively, whether they stay young and stick to that path. But like in all these things, I actually think that we're seeing now with equalisation and the measures that the AFL are putting in, I think North will bear the fruits of that over the coming years. So I've got a lot of optimism for them.
This is View from the Outer. We're looking at round 10 of the AFL as part of Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures podcast. Forward to Sporto, Italians with life through their hands, and you'll taste every moment of it. Come join our family. You can dine in, take away. You can also use them for functions and catering and group bookings as well. The Bulldogs, boys, I don't think I've seen them play worse than those halcyon years of the early 1980s when Terry DeConning played for them and a few others, Ross Gallagher and Alan McConnell. And Hayden, you would have watched it. That last quarter was as bad as I've seen them play. And the fact they were up at three-quarter time, even though Carlton had dominated the game, probably indicates where Carlton's at as well. They were horrible, the Bulldogs, on the weekend.
Yeah, they were horrible. And, you talk about the early 80s, but the Peter Road era wasn't much fun either, was it, Dan? But no, I think
7 games in 2 years.
Yeah. I think what was telling, I thought, on the weekend was that was the inability for us to switch and play the angles, as coaches call it, that you're forced to kick down the line. It's not as though they weren't trying or looking. It just feels that I think what's been underestimated in these reviews is clearly Carlton were very, very effective defensively. And yes, we played poorly. Yes, our better players were down. And yes, even our middle group, the Frasers and others weren't getting their hands on the ball. And as Beveridge made clear in the press conference, when you're losing the contested game with our contested footy down, you're going to struggle. So that, in combination with what I think is being underestimated, which was Carlton's defensive structures, meant for a pretty poor showing on our part. So, yeah, it's been a frustrating year, and we all know the story behind the story, which is our injuries, and clearly the biggest of them all, seeing Das go down, was heartbreaking. But 5-5, I'm still tuning in and still with fingers crossed. So if we can scratch out a round or two and a win, you might turn 7-7 and then have a run home when those better players come back. Darcy excluded, of course.
Well, we'll wait and see. What do you think, Scotty? I know you're not a great Luke Beveridge fan. He speaks a good speak, if you know what I mean, in regard to the press conference. He seems to say the right things, but he is constantly criticised. I know all clubs have got Facebook pages and forums, etc., and the Bulldogs are particularly harsh, some of them anyway, the Bulldog supporters, on Luke Beveridge, but you've never been a great fan, have you?
I wouldn't say I've never been a great fan. I think he's done a pretty good job overall. He's been there for a fair while now. I'd be interested to see what you guys think. Do you think he's achieved enough? When you won that flag, everyone said this was the beginning of a Bulldogs dynasty because you were so young and it had turned around so quick. And it hasn't quite transpired. You're always sort of thereabouts. and in that top 6 discussion. And you started this year like a house on fire till, as Hayden mentioned, the injuries started to kick in. But where do you guys sit on Bevo? Do you think, is he still the right man for the job, or have you perhaps just, I mean, you'd always take one premiership, but you guys hadn't won a premiership for a long time. You never sneeze at a premiership, but should there have been a couple more? Have you underachieved? I don't know. You two would know more than me on that.
What do you reckon, Dan?
Yeah, I knew you'd throw that at me. Yeah, I think they've underachieved. I think they were heading for a premiership in 2021 until Josh Bruce went down. Then it took them 3 weeks to get their forward line right. They're very reliant on their top-end talent, and I don't think Beveridge makes enough changes during a game to stop a run. I mean, even Carlton kicked 5 goals in a row on them on the weekend, and when they were doing really well against Fremantle, Freo kicked 7 goals both sides of three-quarter time. He makes too many changes. He falls out with players, and he loves players that played like him. He was a player of limited ability, and my humble opinion is that he picks blokes that I don't think are quite good enough, the Lockie McNeils, the Latham Vandermeers, the Ryan Gardners, these sort of guys who've got limited ability that'll give you everything, but when push comes to shove, they're not quite good enough. But the other thing that needs to be said is you can be a good coach, but you haven't got socks. You can't pull them up. As far as I'm concerned, the Bulldogs have got 13 players who are either elite or good players. The rest, as far as I'm concerned, in my judgment on them, I'm sitting on the fence, or they're developing, some very slowly, or they're too young, not ready, or there's half a dozen who aren't good enough. So when you have most of those 13 players who are good or elite players injured or playing injured, you're going to struggle, Hayden, I would have thought, and Scotty.
Yeah, I think there's something in what you say, Dan. But back to your question, Scotty, I think, as a lifelong Bulldog supporter, living through the 80s and the 90s and what we went through, and you have a Luke Beveridge come along in 14 and develop this list and have a premiership under his belt, and obviously playing off in against Melbourne in the COVID grand final. Matched against his peers in that role, he's an outstanding coach and been an outstanding coach for the Western Bulldogs, full stop. I think the knock on him, and it's him and obviously those around him, is that we've never been able to secure a top 4 finish in the regular season. And so even in 16 and in 20, when we ran to the grand final, we did so from a very difficult position in the 8. And so if this team ever is able to have a good run with injuries, and Dan, I actually think the list is in fair shape. I think that it's actually, when you look at sort of the list development, and even when we were winning those 4 games straight, the pundits were saying that we're one of the youngest lists running around. And so there's still room for enormous growth. And when you look at the 16 grand final, you look at the likes of Matty Boyd and others who had been at the club with 50, 100, 150 games under their belt, they do click at some point, at least the better ones. And it seems to be that if we can get games into players of the ilks of Dolan, Himes and these guys, even young Kennedy in the seconds and others, you will reap the benefits of that development over the next 2 or 3 years, a bit what we're seeing with North. And so, I think there's cause for optimism. I do think that history will show that it was the right move to keep Bevo and not move him on about 18 months, 2 years ago. I think history will prove that right. But, I actually think, to answer your question, Scotty, it's not just a pass mark for me. I think he's a distinction in the role. And there will come a time where he steps aside, no doubt, but we'll reflect on this period fondly as Doggies supporters.
As you should, I think so. It's been one of the great eras for the Dogs, really.
Yeah.
And your top 6 is as good as anyone's, really. Bontempelli, in my opinion, is the best player in the game. He's a complete footballer. He's a leader, great player, and you've got some great guys around him, I think. And you can let my club North have some of your father-son luck as well. You've had some good father-sons. We keep just dodging them.
Hey, Scotty, next year, who are you going to play on Bont and Butters in the middle?
Oh, that's the call. There you go. Story is broken. You'll upset Dan. You'll inflame him now.
Don't we need, or don't the Bulldogs? Yeah, you have. Yeah, don't the Bulldogs need a key defender before Butters though, Hayden?
Yeah, we're getting Charlie Cobden.
Could Croft
I'm
go
having
down
Jake
back?
Petering. Who's that, Croft?
Could he get to develop into a defender? I mean, you've got a lot of young tools from where I sit. You know, led by Darcy.
Well, he's not even getting a game, Croft, which I just don't quite understand. I had him in the best 23 at the start of the season, but he can't even get a game for the Bulldogs, which is strange when you consider all the injuries they've got.
He strikes me as he's going to be a player in better company. I actually think that when he has stepped up to the ones, he's played better. But he must be doing stuff that they've asked him to work on, and until he does that, he won't be promoted. I gather that's reading between the lines. But yeah, when he appeared in the finals last year against Freo or the mini final at round 23, I just thought he was a breath of fresh air. He was just outstanding. Yeah, Crofty. I just back to the backman. You know, there is a theory I'm going to advance, which is that when you look at the better teams, even Freo and the Swans this year, they're still getting scored against. It's just that they're scoring much better and much higher. But you know, with the rule changes and clearly the agenda of the AFL is to bring more pace to the game. Backman, strong backman, a good spine will always trump. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but is it possible that when you've got a competition between drafting a centre player of the ilk of Butters or a backman of a Wiedering, for example, at Carlton, is it just possible in where the game's heading that you're better off loading your chips on the midfielder and your ability to score quickly and set up and forward thrusts and the like, than investing in what we've become used to is always defence first? And I just reckon it's interesting. It must be a debate that recruiters are having each year as to where the game's heading and trying to recruit to its needs.
Scotty, the issue on that, though, is it's a big turnover game, isn't it? So if you turn the footy over, you're going to be under the pump, aren't you? I would have thought your defence.
Yeah, and I've touched on that with North. Our problem is we don't necessarily have the foot skills to retain possession and carry the ball from end to end smoothly to score. And we have a lot of guys who have fairly shaky foot skills. A guy like LDU, great player, moves beautifully in traffic, looks $1 million till the point at which he kicks it, in which case it doesn't really generally go to our advantage. So it's a turnover game now, and that's what I talked about, North needing those classy running backs. And we've got Caleb Daniel playing down there but can't defend. He's too short to play on anyone nowadays, and he's just not that sort of player, and yet we're trying to, use him in that role while we try to find some other players to do it. So, yeah, the game has all gone to turnover now and transition, and that's probably one area we've struggled a bit. Whereas your guys, the Dogs, have been masters of that for a while.
Not so much this year, Hayden. That's been a big issue. They've turned the footy over, and Bailey Dale, who to me is an elite player, dual All-Australian, I think he's gone backwards as well. Suffered a bit of a knee injury before the season started, but he can't hit the side of a barn door at the moment, Bailey Dale.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Look, he's certainly not hitting the heights of the prior years, but again, I just urge patience, Dan. I know we've had these debates long and hard on the phone, often after a loss, but my sense is that the list is in fair shape. And if you can get, say, 5 to 10% improvement from that mid-tier to lower group in that list, then you'll see a lift in performance. It allows the cream of the crop then to show their wares, Even if you look at last year, you look at Fraser and the improvement he made, he's been tagged the mini bont these days. Yes. But if you can get that across 3 or 4 players, you will improve. And you've seen it even with Fremantle. Like I was watching recently, that Harley Reid. I mean, gee, what a magician. He's Ginnivan-like in the way he sets up. He turned the game against us literally off his own boot.
Murphy Reid.
Murphy Reid, I'm sorry. Yeah, my apologies. Murphy Reid for Freo. Harley Reid's the Westerners. But Murphy Reid is, I think, one of the most exciting players in the league going around. I actually, you know, and he was picked up late teens, wasn't he?
14.
He was mid-20s, early to mid-20s.
He slipped, didn't he? And it's just full credit to the recruitment team at Freo, because he is the modern game specialist. I actually think that, yeah, if there's a player of the year so far, he's mine.
I would like to jump on that, to just change topic a bit here and say, yeah, how impressed I've been with Freo. You know, they've been maligned for so long, but they have built this list immaculately, really, when you look at it. They haven't had the academy choices other teams have gotten, father, sons and all that. They've had to do it the traditional way, you know, albeit they get a Luke Jackson back from over east and a couple of other guys, Shai Bolton, obviously, who's a gun. But the rest of their list development has just been phenomenal. And, you know, picking up Josh Tracy in the rookie draft, I think it was, who's turned into an absolute gun. You know, their back line is very, very solid. They've obviously got a very, very good midfield. You know, Isaiah Dudley, another, you know, pick from out of nowhere, who's turned out to be very good for them. I reckon kudos to Freo. They have really, at a time when it's probably harder to come up than it's ever been because of the inequities of the draft nowadays, they've just gone about it, stuck to their guns, and have put together a great team. And I reckon if they win the flag, which, you know, they've got to be in the discussion for now, I reckon it'll be one of the most impressive efforts it's been for a long time, because they just haven't had the leg ups that some other teams have had. And yet there they are. I reckon it's a great effort.
Justin Longmuir as a coach, Hayden. I mean, I've always been not impressed. I mean, he doesn't come across as a guy with a lot of charisma, a lot of colour, but he seems to have built this team from defence into attack. And as we said, they've won 9 in a row, and I think they're going to be very, very hard to beat and probably deserve to win a premiership the way things are going at this stage, even though it's only May.
Yeah, I reckon if I saw him on the bill for Melbourne Comedy Festival, I'm not sure I'd buy tickets. He doesn't fill you with laughter that much. But look, it goes to say this is like, and we're back to Bevo, and we're back to the successful coaches. They must clearly have the ability to establish a very good rapport with their players and a relationship with their players to get the best out of them. And I do think he's in that category. You know, he's been there now 4 or 5 years. He's done the hard yards, as Scotty's alluded to. You know, they've stuck to their guns, and they're seeing again the benefits of that through the improvement of that mid-tier range. And then you add to that, as I alluded to, a Murphy Reed and a Shai Bolton and Tracy, obviously with his marking capacity up front, and even Jackson. You know, we know what Jackson did to us in the 2020 grand final. And he has not stepped backwards. Yeah. He's gone faster and forward. He's an incredible athlete. And so in combination, you know, they're, I certainly hope they go deep into the finals. And of course, Dan, they're well led by an ex-Bulldog in Simon Garlick.
Yes, they are.
So it would appear that they're a club where, you know, as they say, they've got their executive lined up, to their coaching staff, to their playing group. Everyone's aligned in what they've got to do and do their job. So I'm with Scotty. I'd sort of standing ovation to them so far. I think it's an outstanding start to the season.
And of course, they've got Marcus Bontempelli's favourite assistant coach in Joel Corey. Just before we move on to other teams, I found out from someone who's pretty close to the club at a local football match on the weekend, the Bont's knee is far more serious than first thought. They went in, had a look at the medial, which has been damaged, and said it is a shocker. What do you do with him? Scotty first. I mean, I would think that the season's slipping away, but everyone knows that I'm 3/4 glass empty when it comes to the Bulldogs. I think he needs a rest. I mean, he just ran out of legs on Saturday, and Paddy Cripps didn't tear him apart, but got on top of him. What would you do, Scotty? I mean, the body's struggling, even though he's still playing well.
Well, I guess that's for Bevo and him to decide, isn't it? They know what his capacity is and what the risk of further injury is. I mean, he's just an unbelievable player, an unbelievable leader, though, and I fully understand why, if they can get him out there, they do. But, yeah, perhaps if you get to the stage where things are slipping away, then you take the long-term view and say, well, we're best off resting him because we're not going to win it this year. But I fully understand why he'd run the risk because, he is your spiritual and on-field leader. And, you're a much better side when he's playing well because he lifts you like very few other players can.
If the midfield was better, Hayden, if Richards was playing better, if Kennedy, I think he's gone back a little bit. He doesn't use the ball. I know he tries his guts out and he's a great clubman. But if the midfield was better, Fraser found some form. There's a lot of ifs, buts and maybes here. Would you try and put Bont forward and maybe just play him there permanently, knowing that he'd get a little bit more of a rest in regard to that knee?
Short answer, yes. And it's a need. It's a need of the team. We've had Darcy go down and Norton. He's the sole man up there at the moment. So yes, let's face it. You could put Bont anywhere and it's a win. But you're playing forward, but conditional on those factors you mentioned, Dan. That those that have been charged in the midfield need to step up. And it begs the question, will we ever see Treloar back in there?
No.
He teased them last year with his performance in the VFL Grand Final, and I think on the basis of that, they've given him another run. But when he came back a couple of weeks ago, we could all see it as people in the outer, couldn't we? That he just could not accelerate with his body. So kind of very sad to see, but I don't know. We live in hope. Even if he came back into that midfield and played a part role, you would take it and then push Bont forward, as you say, Dan.
And now they've lost, though, one of their most valuable players, the truck, Bailey Williams, who played 79 in a row. And North Melbourne have those sort of players too, Scotty, that don't get enough credit. He's very unsung, Williams, but he's a massive loss. And they reckon at one stage it looked like he was gone for the year. It was that severe, but it's 6 weeks now. That's still a fair chunk, isn't it, Hayden?
Yeah, it is. And I was pleased to see, though, that we've got O'Donnell back as a possible this week, and even English is an outside chance. So get those two back may offset Truck's absence, but yeah, it's a blow. And every team's got them, haven't they? These unsung week in, week out players who just give everything. And who do you bring in? You bring in another kid, and again, you get games in them. So I don't know. This year's sort of fast becoming a bit of a developing year, but again, I'm the optimist. 5-5. I'm not giving up yet, especially if that midfield group can lift, as you said, Dan.
Well, I've given up, but anyway, almost given up. Almost given up. We'll see what happens next week when they beat Melbourne. We'll get the Demons in a second. Scotty Coghlan and Hayden Stevens, two of the great students of the game of AFL footy, have joined me. Hayden follows the Bulldogs. Scotty is known as the Arden St Angler, based in Perth, Mad King Kangaroos supporter, and we're on view from the outer forward to Sport Over. Italy comes alive on a plate. Forwards from Mona's Fiction made with Southern Soul. And you can find them in Williamstown, Yarraville, Essendon, the kiosk at Williamstown Beach, Toledo to Sporto, and Batega to Sporto, near where Hayden grew up at Yarraville. Now, he spoke, Scotty, about Tim English. If Tim English doesn't play this week, the best ruckman in the comp, Max Gawn, will have a picnic. How well are Melbourne going? They've surprised me. I reckon they've surprised everyone. Stephen King's come in. This is why I think a new coach is often a great idea, fresh ideas. Got rid of players that were good players, great players in Petrarca. May, of course, retired, forced to retire. And also Oliver left. But they haven't missed a beat, have they? And the big fella, Max Gawn, Scotty, keeps dominating, doesn't he?
Well, just get another All-Australian Guernsey, won't he? He just keeps everyone out. Now, man, Tristan Cherry can't get a look in because Gordon's got it locked up for life. But amazing. Like, who would have thought that Stephen King would come in and, I mean, there was a lot of talk pre-season. They were going to be exciting. They were going to play fast. They played us in pre-season and absolutely towed us up. But you thought, that won't last. It won't amount to a great deal, especially when you looked at the players they'd lost. But, gee, they're good to watch. I mean, Cozzy Pickett, what a player. And without wanting to harp on bagging North, we traded out of a draft one year and went back to the next year where we picked up Tom Powell with the pick we got. The two players who were available at the pick we would have had were Caleb Sarong and Cozzy Pickett. How bad does that look? I mean, he is just an absolutely incredible player. What a player to watch.
Well, you look at players, Hayden, like Jimmy Tompkins, picked up by Melbourne ahead of Stringer and McRae, and St Kilda picked up Billings. So ironically, he's at the Bulldogs now in a development role and playing in their VFL team ahead of Marcus Bontempelli. And the Saints also picked up thinking he'd be a very good forward, but of course his concussions didn't help him. Patrick McCartney ahead of Christian Petrarca. We've seen a lot of shockers over the years, haven't we, draft-wise?
Oh, yeah. And I've got to say, from about 14, again, I think our team have done pretty well. We've had some misses, clearly. But, yeah, some of those that you mentioned, the Billings and Bontempelli one, it's folklore in my family. It's incredible. The fact that we picked up that Bont at number 4. And McRae and Stringer, from that draft and the one after it, we built the 16 premiership, which is just fantastic.
I think Richmond still have nightmares over Richard Tambling and Aaron Fiora, don't they? But their 3 flags eventually made up for it.
And yeah, just on the Tigers, though, they had 7 picks in the top 25 a couple of years ago, and they can hardly get any of them on the park. One kid I saw when I used to call some footy for the Yarra Junior Football League in the under-15s was Josh Smiley. He was heading at the under-15s, as I say. He was head and shoulders above everyone else, and I thought, this kid will certainly make it. He can't get on the park and may never get on the park. I mean, they were good picks, you would have thought, but they just can't get fit, the Tigers. That's a massive issue for them, Scotty, isn't it?
Well, it is. They're down to the bare bones, aren't they? So, and then they did well to beat West Coast a couple of weeks ago. Everyone was starting to think they wouldn't win a game. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of debate around Adam Uze. Can he coach? Is he not a great coach? But really, his hands are pretty tied behind his back at the moment, aren't they? They're just putting out whoever they can and hoping for the best. And they probably could have won 2 games because they certainly outplayed Carlton. But Tom Lynch just could not buy a goal that night. So, they're a hard team to judge, Richmond. They turned over the list after that great era. And they've got a lot of promising kids, but yeah, they just need to get them out there and actually get some games in them. So I don't know. Is Adam Uze the man? It's hard to know.
And Hayden, they play Essendon this Friday in Dreamtime at the G, so one of them will have a win. Brad Scott keeps being confident. I thought they were horrendous on the weekend until the last quarter. I reckon there was a combination of they just had to show some pride and Freo putting the cue in the rack. They kicked 5 goals in the last quarter. But they've drafted badly. This kid, Sullivan Roby, looks all right, but you can't rely on him to play well every week. But Brad Scott has to be under the pump, Hayden, doesn't he? Has to be.
Yeah, look, yes, yeah, he will be. These guys are judged on wins and losses. But again, if you take a cold, hard look at the last 5-10 years, I think Essendon's story comes down to two issues. The first is the legacy of the drugs scandal. And the impact it had on that club and its culture. And the second is the performance of its recruitment team, which was, below par relative to teams like the ones we've mentioned, Dogs included. And so, I do think, and Scotty, you might have a view on this, but my impression of Scott at North Melbourne was he did a serviceable job. He brought a good culture, the shin boners culture. He had a great work ethic and he did well out of the list he had. And so he doesn't lose the ability to coach. I think he's just walked into a club that has these legacy issues that he's battling to get through. Now, unfortunately, of course, the wagons will circle and they'll come for him. But I just reckon that it's a more systemic issue and a systemic problem at Essendon than meets the eye now.
I think you're right with Brad and Essendon in particular. He was an interesting guy at North. He came in when we seemed to be in a lot of trouble and actually got pretty good results straight away and got us to a point where we were a very competitive side. But we just could never quite break into that top 4. And I think he probably stayed too long. I think there was a time when he started thinking about other options. I think he was sniffing around Gold Coast. Probably should have moved him on there. One of my great mates in Perth could never stand Brad, and he called him the hypnotist. And that's what he's called him for all, and he still calls him the hypnotist now. Every time there's a Brad Scott press conference, he rings me and goes, the hypnotist said it again. I think he stayed too long, and it ended very badly. I mean, we will see the fruits of it this weekend. Apparently, Scott Pendlebury's going to break the record. I don't know if you've heard that, you blokes, but apparently Pendlebury's going to break the record.
Yeah, it's been mentioned a little bit, not much, Scotty, just a little bit.
He lists Braddles in his wisdom to list the Brent Harvey after he kicked nearly 40 goals in a year and had about 600 touches as a small forward, albeit he didn't chase a lot, Brent, at that stage of his career. But we haven't had a small forward near that since. He could have played for another 2 years, I would have thought. So his time at North did not end all that well, Brad. So let's see how the hypnotist goes. But I think he's under a lot of pressure now.
Can I ask you, going back,
Dan?
Yeah, go on.
Who would you go? Who would you rather be, Essendon or Richmond?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? I think Richmond, again, on the prize, as I sit on the fence and pull splinters out of my backside, I think Richmond on the proviso that these kids can get on the park. Again, there's a lot of ifs, couldas, wouldas, maybes, but if they can get on the park, I do like their kids. Essendon have got, I mentioned before, Sullivan Roby looks all right. Farah looks good. I think they've got to persevere with Sardis, top 5 draft pick. Not a great kick, but very good in. They've got to persevere with. We know Dale can play and Roberts can play, but I think Richmond have got a bit more upside if they can get all these kids on the park. So I would go at this stage, Richmond, even though, of course, they're a powerful club. Scotty mentioned the fact, and you too, Hayden, mentioned the fact that Essendon, it's tough. I think they're a victim of their own success, a bit like Carlton. The natives expect success, and I, at this stage, would go for Richmond. What about you?
I think a lot goes on behind the scenes at Essendon as well with coterie groups and that. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of politics goes on. But if you're going to pick between Richmond and Essendon, well, Richmond won 3 flags not that long ago. Essendon haven't won a final for about 20 years. So I'd go Richmond.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, Dan. I think Richmond. I think too. Back to Melbourne, and you touched on their success so far. Petrarca and Oliver were, great players for Melbourne, but clearly in that final year, their presence was clearly an incredible pressure on the club. And then in combination with Goodwin, who by this stage was the end or nearing the end of his tenure, you could see almost a pressure cooker applying. And when you release that, it appears that King is sort of reaping the benefits of that, a bit like, you might say, Beveridge post McCartney in 15. And so when you look at a club like Essendon, the sense is that if you can beat some of these bigger issues that they're battling with, and get the right caliber of people in place, and trying to eject some of the bad influence. I'm not suggesting that I'm familiar with any at the moment, but these 2 big hangovers of poor recruiting and the drug scandals seem to hang. If they can get some clear air, they can move up pretty quickly, as Melbourne is showing. So for me, if clubs can create the right environment and remove these pressure points, particularly in the environment where we've got equalisation, they can move quickly and go up the ladder very, very fast. So, but back to my own question, I'd certainly pick Richmond ahead of Essendon at this stage.
Just on Melbourne, Scotty, I mean, they're going well on the field, and the fact they're going well on the field, winning always papers over the cracks, but they made that all the Smith did that. But Paul Guerra just wasn't the right for the. He was basically a one-man band. They haven't got that area right yet, but as I just said before, it probably doesn't matter that much if you win, does it?
Yeah, winning does cure all ills, doesn't it? It's interesting with Melbourne because I was at that grand final where they beat your boys, and the way they played in the second half of that game, and with the team they had, you thought this is going to be, a team that will win 3 or 4 flags in the coming years. Yeah. But a bit like your guys, when you look like you were going to win a bunch of flags in a row, I've driven him to drink by mentioning this game. Oh, dear. Yeah. Nothing is going in the
I hope the lovely Toskins are looking after him over in Sydney at the moment. But yeah, that was a tough watch in the second half, Scotty. Thank you for bringing that up. You
couldn't believe when you watched Melbourne win that day and that they wouldn't win another flag. You just thought, well, they are going to win more flags. They were such a good team, but it doesn't always pan out, doesn't it? Does it? Not every team can do a Brisbane and just keep fronting up each year.
Well, they haven't won a final since Melbourne. They have not won a final since, and they have underachieved. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But this year's been a good one so far. Just on that, Hayden, I know you walked away, you were disappointed. I mean, the Bulldogs were cooked in the second half of that grand final. You've got to remember, without going on too much about this, you've got to remember that they started in Tasmania. It was the COVID year, so there wasn't much football in Melbourne the second half of the year. They won that final after stuffing up the last 3 games. Then they've gone to Brisbane and beaten the Lions in an absolute thriller by 1 point. Thank you, Taylor Duray, for stopping Charlie Cameron from getting goal side. That was a great piece of work late in the match. And Caleb Daniels kicked that I thought he missed kick that was under the legs of a Brisbane player and hit hit Ralph Smith on the chest. And then they've had to go to Perth for a week, as you would know, Scotty, just in case they won the prelim, to have a week in quarantine. Then they've gone back to Adelaide. And I remember Luke Beveridge's famous comment when they weren't allowed to train on the Adelaide Oval, they had to be tested. He said, I reckon we've been tested 37 times in the last month. I can assure all Bulldog supporters we have not got it. We have not got it. And then I reckon, being a Bulldog supporter, they played the best half of football I have ever seen in my life in destroying Port Adelaide, who just said it's a matter of turning up. All their supporters will be in the granny next week. And then they've gone back to Perth, and by the second half, they were cooked. And you would know, Scotty, you saw that game. They looked dead on their feet when they couldn't put Melbourne away early in the third quarter. But the team was definitely the best.
He was going to win them the game by himself for a while there. He was playing unbelievably well. Wasn't COVID a fun time, though? We should talk about that one day. What a great time.
Here's the worst thing than COVID, and that was a minute 10 to go in the third quarter.
Yeah.
They're about 8 points up, Melbourne. They've had a run, but Petrarca kicks two goals in a minute 10 to go, and it put them up, by 3 or 4 goals at 3/4 time. It was heartbreaking.
Oliver kicked that goal right on the 3/4 time sign. We just ran out of petrol tickets because, as I said, we couldn't put them away.
It was an incredible powerhouse 30 minutes of football by Melbourne. I mean, they had 10 minutes where it was just straight out of the centre, straight forward through the goals and back to the middle again and do it all over again. And that's where you thought, well, this is a team destined for greatness, but it didn't transpire.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, do you remember the contest on centre wing that turned it? Harms kicked it to Fritz. Eastonwood was playing on him, and that started the right. There was because we were 17 points up. Bont takes a shot. I think he misses, but we've got clear momentum, and there's a 5 minute sort of holding pattern. Then there's that centre throw in from the wing. Harms grabs it, kicks it long, and that just, I think they kicked about 6 or 7 goals in about 8 minutes. It was just incredible.
The dam wall open. It was a great effort to get there, but they should have finished top. Or anyway, that was 5 years ago. We're looking at round 10 for you from Doubter or to Desporto. I know, Hayden, you want to talk about the Dogs, but we've got to talk about other things as well. And we're here for Desporto restaurants based throughout the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne and the western suburbs, whether you're pulling up a chair for dinner, grabbing your favourite pizza on the way home, best pizzas too, and also pastas, or gathering the whole crew for something special. Desporto is where the laid-back charm of Italy South meets the style of the North. Familiar, generous, and unforgettable. Claude and Antoinetta and their team do an outstanding job. And also, because I'm there most weeks, tell them Dan sent you. I don't think anyone's done that just yet. We've had them up as our sponsors for a few weeks. Boys, and I know, Hayden, you live in Sydney and they're always up there. Where do you see Sydney? They're going pretty well, aren't they? I mean, they got out of jail on Friday night with 15 minutes of footy, and I think that has a lot to do with the self-belief that they'll win from anywhere.
You know what's scary, Dan, is that they're doing this without Goulden.
Correct. Correct.
When you look at the modern game, the stand rule, the fast pace, and you look at his kicking ability, boy, is he going to make a big difference when he hits the scene and gets fit. They're flying at the moment. But, remember, 10 rounds, still a long way to go. You don't win premierships in May. So I do think that you're going to see the mature bodies. I actually think Hawthorn's the sleeper here. I think that they are a pretty special team, brilliantly coached, great list, and capable of big things. So I actually think that, we've spent a bit of time with Freo tonight. We've talked about the Swans, or about to obviously lavish praise on them. But for me, it's Hawthorn I'd watch in the second half of the season.
I suppose the question with the Swans as well would be how that game plan will hold up in finals. It's they love that running forward, handball over the top game plan, and will that work in finals? That'll be the question that'll be asked, and they have had a couple of final shockers in recent years, so that'll be the big challenge for them. But they're a good side. They're right in that mix.
You're worried, Scotty? I know Melbourne have got the advantage of the MCG. They're 6 from 6 there. They probably haven't proven themselves at other games, but of course the big finals in Melbourne are played at the MCG, so they stand themselves in good stead. You're worried about Sydney away from the SCG, which, as we know, is the smallest ground in the comp.
I think they're good enough to win anyway. I don't think that would faze Sydney too much. They would back themselves in. I mean, there's been a lot of that talk about Brisbane in recent years, but then Brisbane just when they need to win, lift another level. And I think Sydney have probably got the talent to do that. So, I mean, they've got to prove it. We'll see how they go. But I wouldn't think Sydney would be particularly worried about playing the MCG. I think they'd embrace that as a challenge, I would have thought.
Now, Hayden mentioned before, who would you rather be, Essendon or Richmond? Who would you rather be, Scotty, Hawthorn or Sydney? Hawthorn is just off the boil a bit. I think they lack a little bit of depth. Barras is a big loss. The midfield lacks depth anyway. They've got to get Will Day back in that side. I'm not sure that young Henry Huswaite, I know his family quite well, is going to make it. Just looks a bit slow for mine. And the forward line missing some key players. But Hayden's right. If they get it right, I don't think there are any weaknesses there. So who would you rather be, Sydney or Hawthorn, Scott?
I think I'd take Sydney, personally. I think Sydney are a slightly better team, possibly a little bit more class. Obviously, Gunston has been unbelievable for Hawthorn. Now he's had an injury setback, but he's been incredible for them this year. I don't know, I just feel like Sydney have a little bit more talent across the field. There's no doubt the Hawks are well coached and they've got plenty of talent of their own, but I just think Hawthorn, Sydney are maybe that little bit better.
Well, there's you've got upside with Curnow too, haven't you? Yeah. I mean, he structured them up. He had a good game against us, Dan. But
he didn't have any players though.
Grundy having a great season as well.
Yeah, and Gordon to come back. So I think, I can see your point, Scott. It's just that, you said it or Dan said it, I think, come finals, the fast-paced footy, and it's been flipping around in dry weather. It just comes off a bit in finals, and you've got those mature bodies come to the fore. So I just reckon, my sense is that Hawthorn's midfield, I think, is pretty good.
Do you think if there's another preliminary final like last year, Hayden, when Geelong, through Patrick Dangerfield turning back the clock, had a big win, that Hawthorn can beat Geelong? I mean, they're an incredible side, Geelong. I don't like them much because they've had so much success, and I just think there's some things going on there that we haven't been able to find out, allegedly. Chris Scott, we talked about being coached for a long time. He's in his 16th year. He plays it down. He said it's not a very good job. But again, on the weekend, the way he coached was he just dismantled Brisbane by ensuring that the intercept game of Harris Andrews didn't exist. I still think if Geelong were playing Hawthorn in a final, they'd beat them and beat them comfortably.
Well, I reckon, maybe you're right. They're an incredible club. I mean, who would have thought, Dan, we've grown up, born, bred Melbourne. Who would have thought that one day we'd be saying Geelong is the destination club? I mean, go figure.
Yeah.
It's incredible what they've been able to achieve down there, and the stadium's great. And again, their recruiting team has done an outstanding job. But they've got a few aging stars, and they'll be exposed, I imagine, in due course of what their bottom six players are like. But again, I just reckon Hawthorn's running ability and the excitement of the Watsons and the Ginnivans, and for me, they kind of they beat the equivalent, line them up against Myers and the other fella, the fleet-footed player. His name escapes me, but just line those guys up against the Hawthorn equivalent of Ginnivan and Watson. It just strikes me that Hawthorn have got the edge.
Jeremy Cameron, though, got he's a pretty good player. Hasn't really set the world on fire yet this year. He did against the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs have had this ability this year to run players into form. Cameron and Curnow's had one good game, two examples of that. But if Cameron gets going, he's going to be hard to stop, isn't he? who's going to stop Tom Stewart unless you do what Geelong did on the weekend and play someone on him and drag him up the ground?
They've definitely got some guns, and Shannon Neal's playing pretty good footy too for an unheralded guy. He's come in and proven to be a pretty good key forward. They're amazing record, Geelong, of being able to develop, I think, as much as anything. Players, they've picked up guys like Manar that were available to anyone in mid-season draft, and they've just developed. They all develop well and become, which is probably a credit to Chris Scott, maybe their game plan as well. They just get the best out of these guys, and they're the envy of every other club. But I'm a bit like Hayden. I'm just not sure. They're always going to be thereabouts, but I don't think they can beat the best when it really matters. They are a bit, Dangerfield is not always going to be able to turn back the clock. I just don't think they're quite there.
But they have, Hayden, as Scotty said, developed players really well. They've developed the two Irish boys. They're so important to the team now in O'Connor and Mullen. But what they don't have, which they seem to get away with, is a quality ruckman. Yeah. They haven't had a quality ruckman, Geelong, but Hayden, they keep stepping up, don't they?
Yeah, they find a way, don't they? And again, the game changed this year with the stand rule and other changes, and they seem to have relished in it because they put pace on the ball. When Hawkins retired, we're worried about how they kick goals, and Cameron steps into it. And this kid, Shannon, as you said, he's now almost one of the top sort of half a dozen forwards in the game, really. Reminds me a bit of Morris for what Morris brought to the Brisbane Lions, that sort of third or second tool that takes the pressure off the main forward. And suddenly you've got a two-headed monster that kicks goals for your forwards. So I actually think, when you look at Geelong, they're almost Sydney-esque, aren't they, in the sense that they haven't really dipped down low in the ladder. They've been able to hold high with clever recruiting and as has been shared on this call, the ability to develop players who other clubs have had access to, recruited them, identified them as talent, and built on that. So, I say this begrudgingly because I'm not a big fan of Brad Scott or Chris Scott. I'm sorry, in that I think that he has this incredible confidence and arrogance in the press conference. I think he's just so polished in the way that he handles himself in the media. So polished that it kind of gives me the shits. But good luck to him. I actually think good luck to him, and I actually think they're clearly an outstanding club that's brought great teams to the field. But a bit with Scotty, I actually think push come to shove, come finals, I'm not sure they'll have the cattle to see them on the final day.
The other thing they did really well, and I mean, they've done well with free agents and stuff as well, but they were one of the few clubs that did any good in that COVID draft. They got Holmes and Neal, I think, in that draft, when no one else, because there was no exposed form, no one else really picked up much of value at all. So that is a huge credit to their recruiters and their talent ID that they got two really good players in the draft where everyone else struggled.
And they also got them pretty low too, Scotty, didn't they? I mean, you look at the top 10 of that draft, and obviously Thilthorpe's been a good player for the Adelaide Crows. McDonald's getting better at Sydney. Denver, Granger, Barras didn't make it at Hawthorn, but you're right. Again, they were relatively low picks, and Geelong have been experts at that. Talking of Max Holmes, Hayden, the other Dash brother who was a Bulldog, probably had his best year in 2021 and started in the finals. I hate saying this, but he's taken his game to another level, and it's just disappointing that he virtually moved away from the Bulldogs, didn't he? When he did his knee, he had no interest in wanting to be there at all, and it would have been interesting if he had played that year.
I support if he's not happy, he goes. I'm in that camp, but what's frustrating about that is that we got picked 19. He's clearly a top 10 pick every day of the week. He was then, is now. And they seem to have managed him and his personality and what he's brought to the club. But it's the compensation was pretty frustrating, I've got to say. But he is absolutely flying. He's a ball magnet and uses it well, and has what the modern game wants, and that is burst speed. You know, he breaks lines and he goes. So, yep, it's frustrating to see, Dan, but hey, maybe we'll get one or two back the other way one day.
We'll see. You are, as I said, you are the eternal optimist, and I'm the eternal pessimist. That's why we're good mates and we work well together. Scotty, where do you think Adelaide are? That was their best performance on the week. Your mob. They didn't have Tilthorpe, I should say, and they didn't have Taylor Walker, but they looked better without them, didn't they, dare I say?
Well, they certainly did. I mean, I guess the question would be what sort of effort we put up when we were so poor in that second quarter and really barely touched the ball. I mean, they're a good side, Adelaide. You know, they finished up the top last year for a reason. Again, I guess the question mark over them, and we've discussed this with a few teams, is are they quite good enough? Is their midfield good enough? That's probably the question. They've chucked Rankine in there this year, and he can seriously play. And that's probably their weakness. Is their midfield good enough to go with the absolute best midfields in the comp? And until they show they can, that'll be the question mark, and that will come at final time. They're always going to win most of their games at home. So if they split half their games away, they're going to finish thereabouts in the top 4 or 6 and be a chance. But they got a bit of work to do off what they showed in the finals last year.
Well, I mean, Rankine must be new for the Adelaide Crows, Scotty. I thought his name was Rankin. But anyway, I won't hold that against you. Hayden, looking at the Crows, they've won a lot of close games. And when the Bulldogs won the flag in 2016, they won 8 games by 2 goals or less. And Port, the other way, have lost 4 games by 3 points or less, while Adelaide finally found a way to win the close ones. That sort of kept them in contention, hence why they're 6-4. But to me, their form doesn't indicate that they deserve to be a 6-4.
Yeah, I reckon, they enjoy a great home ground advantage over there, and they've got an incredibly potent forward line. And they've got, as Scotty's alluded to, they've got a great centre line. And you've got developing backs in Worrell and others. So they're well placed. I think the question for them is whether they can stay injury free. By and large, relative to other teams, because they perhaps don't have the same depth as some of the better teams that we've mentioned tonight. And I think, I think they're probably there or thereabouts, particularly with the extended finals moving down to, what is it now, 10 teams. So they're thereabouts. They'll feature in that block. But relative to, what we've talked about in terms of the quality of the Swans, Freo, and Hawthorn, and even Geelong creeping in, and of course you've got Brisbane. Don't ever forget them. I don't see Adelaide in that bracket. I do not see Adelaide in that bracket, despite their terrific home and away season form last year.
I tell you what, Rochelle looked good on the weekend. He had a blinder, and Curtin's back. Yeah, he's a very good player.
Yeah. What about Port, Scotty? They've, as I said, lost all those close games. I think they rely on too few, don't they? And the young kids are not quite there yet. I mean, when someone like a Butters, who gets tagged, which isn't very often, and doesn't have a good game, or Alia's down, or Georgiades is down, or Horn Francis is battling a bit for form at the moment, you just wonder where their match winner is going to come from, don't you?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I tend to think they've probably done better than most people would have thought thus far this year under Josh Carr. They started against us and played very, very poorly. They didn't fire a shot against us, and you thought, gee, they're going to be one of the bottom sides. But to their credit, they've actually rebounded and been pretty competitive. And as you said, they've lost some really close games. Now, our man Hayden has declared that Butters is already out the door, and he's got his Bulldogs jersey already in the car, so that's going to be an issue for them moving ahead. But I think they've been okay. I think they've probably achieved about where you would expect, if not perhaps even been a little bit more competitive than you might have thought they would be this year.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I reckon Josh Carr in the first game of the season made a bad mistake by being on the boundary. It looked like rabbits in the headlights, and I don't think it was a major contribution, but I don't think being on the boundary helped them. He's very honest at his press conferences. I mean, they lost by 2 points to the Bulldogs, and he said we were horrible. We were horrible, yet they almost won the game. So is he being a bit harsh? Is he expecting too much because of the ethos of that club, which has a lot to do with the Port Adelaide Pies, which should be two separate entities, that they're there to win premierships. I mean, I think he's being a bit harsh on them at the moment. I think they've been quite competitive, Paul.
Hey, Dan, they were horrible against us. They were horrible.
But we still only just won, Hayden, which is a massive concern.
That's the point, Dan.
Yeah. They've won one game in 6 matches, the Bulldogs, and that's by 2 points. Exactly right. Yeah, they were pretty bad, but they still nearly won the game.
This has turned into a counselling session for Bulldogs fans.
Oh, not really. I'm trying to stay away, but he keeps. I had a Carlton bloke on a couple of weeks ago, and he kept bringing up Carlton all the time on our podcast, which you can get on Spotify and all social media outlets. It's called View from the Outer, part of Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures, and for Desporto, well-known restaurants throughout the western suburbs and western suburbs of Melbourne, where Italy comes alive on a plate. You get them at Williamstown, Yarraville, Essendon, the kiosk on Williamstown Beach, Gelato Desporto, Bottega Desporto in Yarraville. We mentioned Brisbane briefly. Scotty, would you be worried, or you just have to, or they just have to win enough games, which they normally do, and finish top 6, and then let their magnificent finals experience record through the talk?
There is cause for concern, I guess, in the manner in which they've been beaten. But I don't know if I'd be worried if I was Brisbane, because if there's ever a team that it doesn't, I mean, you want to finish top 4, but I think Brisbane are one of those teams. They could finish 5th or 6th, and we've seen it the last 2 years. They haven't been a dominant side, really, during the season. But when they get going, they're unstoppable. They've got class on every line. You know, their forward line is potent. They've got gun midfielders. You know, Lockie Neal leads the way. You know, there's guys like Bailey and Hugh McCluggage is an incredible. They've got all these guys who, when it's a big game, can lift to a level that most other teams can't match. You know, they've got 2 young Ashcrofts. They've got Fletcher. There would be a level of concern, but to my mind, and I guess it's a boring thing to say, they're still the best team to beat. The team to beat, I think, because on their day, they are the best team. It's as simple as that, in my opinion.
Do you agree, Hayden?
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, their track record suggests that you'd be a brave person to say otherwise. The only thing is, you know, they go deep into the season 3 years running. Those stars that you mentioned, McCluggage and others, you know, their bodies are like all of AFL footballers, you know, arguably a bit frail at the end of season. And so if they can, if they get hit with a few problems on the injury front, like the best of us, among other teams, they will fall. But if they can keep their list together and you know, as you say, Scotty, come home with a wet sail come finals time, even if they are finishing 7th, watch out, because certainly when it comes September, they know how to win games, as is shown by their recent form.
Well, we saw that, Scotty, didn't we, against Sydney, when Hayden touched on the fact that if you're missing key players, it makes it tough. They had 4 or 5 out that day, and they didn't fire a shot, although I still think their depth is outstanding. I mean, one of the most underrated players in the competition, he's had 7 one-year deals, and he'd be great at another club as an assistant coach still playing, is Ryan Lester. I mean, there's a player that all clubs would love, wouldn't they, Scotty?
Yeah, absolutely. But as I said, I just think as long as they can, and Hayden's alluded to, if they've got their best side on the park when the whips are cracking, they don't have to be the best side between now and September. They've just got to get into the mix, and then in a month of football, they could just blow everyone away. I think Freo are thereabouts, Sydney are thereabouts, but I'm sure Brisbane are still the team to beat until proven otherwise.
And boys, how do you think Collingwood handled the Scott Pendlebury record-breaking game? I think if he plays against Sydney, they nearly win. If he plays against Hawthorn, they win. I think that they're putting too much emphasis on that, which is costing them games of footy, isn't it, Scotty?
Well, potentially it has, because they have lost those 2 games where he hasn't played. Of course, this is the first we've heard of this Pendlebury thing tonight, because we didn't know that was coming. It hasn't been talked about at all in AFL circles. McRae's been a bit touchy about it, obviously, which suggests that people are probably hitting a nerve, because we're always told it's team first over individual. But they've played it a bit differently to set it up so he could play at the MCG against an opponent they should beat. So I think there'd probably even be a part of Pendlebury, I'd say, that'd be glad when this is over, really, to be honest. It has been a little bit of a circus.
Where does he sit, Hayden, in regard? You've seen a lot of football over the years. Where does he sit for you, Scott Pendlebury?
Great clubman, game record holder. The plaudits go on and on and on. I think what's remarkable about a player like that is what they contribute to the club and the culture. We touched on Melbourne a moment ago, and in some respects, and I'm not deliberately bringing this back to the Dogs, but I think as a club, we've had very good leaders over the journey of the last 10, 20 years. And I think one of the struggles North Melbourne, Scotty, I think has had is it's not as though it's had bad leaders, but it hasn't had leaders who've been able to put their handprint on the makeup of the club. And I think Pendlebury, in the history of Collingwood, has been one of those players. He's inserted himself and his values and his leadership in the way that they play. And for me, Dan, whether he kicks left, right, or he's clever or has most score assists, is just the bonus. For me, it's the clubman that you've recruited, and he has set the template of what the expectations is and are for that club. So what a wonderful, wonderful person he's been for the game, but most importantly, for those, 50, 100 players, 200 players that have had the joy of playing with him, and the supporters at the club have had the pleasure of following him. He has made that club a better club because of Scott Pendlebury.
And before
remember my mate Marcus, Dan, that you had drinks with that night? He called his dog is called Pendles. Because Marcus is a mad Collingwood man. The one thing I'd say about Pendlebury as well is what stands out to me, and I sort of mentioned this before, we're talking about North, LDU's a bit of a scrappy kick. Wardlaw, for all his good traits, a bit of a scrappy kick. Even Cheezel can mung a few. The great thing about Pendlebury, does not waste a possession. It always makes the right decision, finds someone in a better place, just an immaculate user of the football, and you can't buy that in the modern game. It's just essential.
How does the game slow down? How does the game slow down for him? It's extraordinary.
It's incredible, isn't it? Some people have that. And I used to watch Ben Cunnington for North, and he wasn't quick or anything, but he had that spatial awareness of everything that was going on around him. And some players have got it, and Pendlebury's probably got it more than just about any player we've seen.
Hey, can someone text Ben Cunnington tonight and say that on Dan's podcast, he has been mentioned in the same sentence as Scott Pendlebury? Someone's got to tell this bloke.
Well, and Ben Cunnington was an Arden St Angler.
Yeah, he was a terrific player, Ben Cunnington. 3 teams we haven't looked at. The Saints, how do you reckon they're going? I mean, I'm not a great fan of St Kilda. I think that they've gone out and obviously bought these players and paid overs for it. And then the president, Andrew Bassett, has the temerity to contact Amit Baines, Hayden, and say, how dare you try and poach one of our players, of which they offered him everything and he nearly came, Cal Wilkie. And yet that's what St Kilda have been doing to other teams. I reckon they're going okay, but I don't think they're setting the world on fire, are they? They've got a very tough next month, which will decide their season. Don't you think?
Hey, Dan, my brother Jake, we speak to each other Mondays, and on the agenda is always we debrief on the Ross Lyon press conference. It's the most enjoyable thing to watch.
I think
it's just interesting how he can, how he answers, how at times he monsters the press corps, and they're often not experienced to take him on, unfortunately. But just that Pendlebury discussion reminded me that when St Kilda lost to Collingwood and Pendles had, remember that it was round 1 or 2 anyway. McRae brought him on for the last 5 minutes of each quarter, and a young reporter said in the press conference said, "Oh, listen, were you worried about Scott Pendlebury at half time?" And Ross just took her apart and said, "Well, he had 1 kick. What's your problem?" What she should have said, he had the most score assists in the game in his 400-plus career. And you should have been talking about him at halftime. But the way in which he's able to, I think, put a positive spin on their position. I think that the quote of the last few weeks was, look, if it wasn't 4 points, we'd be going really well.
And what about his comments, Scotty? And he was being facetious, no doubt he was. You just had to look into it. It was last week. He said, "We love playing in Darwin. Darwin's a great spot. They should have a round where all teams play there, a little bit like a gather round up in Darwin," which is his way of saying we're unlucky to get the Gold Coast and never lose up there. There was no doubt he was having a crack at that fixture.
Well, that would be very Ross, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
He is a tough taskmaster, and he has his own view of things, and everyone else must bend to that view.
Hey, boys, if you get the chance, watch Cozzy on. I think they have Cozzy and Rewald on the front bar a few months back, and he does this impersonation of Ross Lyon, and it is absolute gold. You've got to watch it. It is fantastic.
The one thing I'd say about the Saints is that they have given Ross the keys to the place, haven't they? And said, do what you want. And he has rolled the dice. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Good luck to them. They're a middle of the road side. I think that's where they'll stay. I don't think it will ever really amount to anything, but they've had a crack at it, but they're not there. They might finish 8th, 9th, 10th, but I think they're a long way off ever contending, and I don't think that they will with what they've got.
And the last two teams we'll look at, boys, before we let you go, and really appreciate your time on View from the Outer, looking at round 10 of the AFL. GWS, I reckon they're in trouble. They've got a lot of injuries as well, and their depth's not as good as I thought. And the West Coast Eagles, and I know they're the biggest team in town, Scotty, but they haven't fired a shot for the best part of 5 or 6 years. With Lachie Neale maybe going home to be with his kids after the breakdown of his marriage, if West Coast can finish the season okay, Scotty, and you're based in WA, would he consider going to West Coast for a couple of years?
I don't know. Maybe he would. It would certainly be a bonus for them. They've got some fairly promising young talls, and Harley Reid is obviously a very good player, a player that probably North should maybe have had if they played their cards correctly in the last round of a season. That was a bit of a disaster, we should say. But up till this week, of course, they'd really shown nothing since they had those 2 good wins, including against my boys. But then they dropped right off the cliff again. So it'll be interesting to see whether they can sustain it. And if you're a fan in WA who follows another team other than West Coast, you'll be sincerely hoping they don't. Because their supporters can be very, very vocal if they think they're going okay.
I'm certainly in that category, Scotty. I've got no time for them.
No time at all?
Having lived there for a while, I can't stand them. But this is why I love Freo so much, because they're a real club. West Coast are a bit of just a franchise. But I think, after the success of the 90s and the various things they've done, even in what did they win in 2018, didn't they? I think they've had enough.
And 2006, which was a controversial win, of course.
Yeah. And they've got a war chest of cash. They're one of the best and well-resourced clubs in the league. Let them do their time, I say.
Well, they've never had a period like this, to be honest. They've never had it in their club history. Never struggled like this. So I don't know.
And a little birdie told me that one of the big factors of equalisation, obviously we know with player payments, but has also been the soft cap. And in the day where the soft cap wasn't as strictly monitored, boy, did West Coast overspend in their coaching and support staff. 3-fold, 10-fold from other clubs. So they've been brought back to the field through these measures, and rightly so.
Weren't they the first club, boys, to get an integrity officer? He was at Copper, who had an altercation with a cameraman when they were trying to do what their job was. And they're at the back of the club trying to film Nick Natanui with his bad knee. And he had a bit of a crack at them. He's the guy who used to be on the bench all the time. They were the first club to employ an integrity officer. And that was 10, 15 years ago. I think most of them do it now. But it indicates, you're right, that they do have the resources. Just before we go, GWS, Adam Kingsley Hayden, I reckon, has been a bit delusional. Yeah, we're going okay. I still think our best footy's in front of us, but they better get going because the season will start slipping away.
Yeah, I reckon they're interesting. I talked the other day about with a mate about, that concept of getting 5-10% out of your middle band of players. And I think GWS over the last few years have benefited. They've probably come out on top and getting the best out of that middle group of improvement year on year. This year, I haven't seen it as much. As from the outer looking in, you're not getting that marked improvement across their list. But be patient with them. They're out there in a territory that's not that friendly, in GWS land, and the work that they're doing to grow the game and grow the club. And I watch it, and I obviously speak to people associated with it. It's frankly quite outstanding what they're doing to try and build a base out there and build momentum. And really, you can't fault their on-field performance over the last 4 or 5 years. So more strength to them. I'm a big advocate for them. If you have a second team, they're not far off it for me. They're fantastic, and I think watch this space. It'd be interesting to who replaces Dave Matthews. These are big appointments for these developing clubs, and so I hope I hope they can get someone who can fill his shoes pretty well, because it's such an important thing for the AFL and the national game that they make GWS work.
Is Hayden Stevens interested in the CEO's job at GWS?
No, Dan. I'm a boring old lawyer in a little office sitting in Surrey Hills doing my thing, Dan, and that's what I do these days.
Fair enough. I had to ask the question because I think you'd be a great leader. Scotty, before we go, where do you think GWS stands? I think they're in trouble. I think they can still maybe make the top 10, but no further than that. I mean, when you lose a player like Tom Green and Hogan's not fit and Taylor, one of the best key defenders in the competition, a lot of clubs like North, the Bulldogs and a few others would love him. There's 3 very good players gone from your team.
Yeah, well, it sort of shows the margins, doesn't it, when you're in that top 10 teams? There's not a lot between most of them. You can probably throw a blanket over 4th to 10th, and they've unfortunately got a few injuries. Some players probably not playing at their best. We talked about the importance of ball movement earlier in the show. They've got Ash and Whitfield, who are 2 of the absolute best, but yet they just can't put it together at the moment. But they're that sort of team. They could turn it around and make a bit of a run. But, yeah, they're just off the boil at the moment. But as Hayden said, I think they'll be somewhere around that 9th to 10th. And they might be able to claim a scalp in the finals. They've got some experience and they've got some talent. But they're not the side that they have been in recent years when they probably should have nearly won a flag.
Boys, I really appreciate your time. Hayden Stevens and Scotty Coghlan, who certainly know their footy, have joined me, Dan Lonigan, on our podcast tonight, View from the Outer. We've had a look at round 10. We're nearly halfway mark into the season, and we thank our sponsor, Desporto. Italy comes alive on a plate. Some restaurants feed you. They bring you home. Every dish at Desporto is a love letter to southern Italy. Artisan crafted from the freshest seasonal produce, which comes in from Italy, built on recipes passed down through generations and served with the warmth of family around a shared table. And they have, of course, outlets at Williamstown, Yarraville, Essendon, the kiosk at Williamstown Beach, Gelato Desporto and Bottega Desporto, a bar in Yarraville, right near a venue that Hayden would know very well, of course, the cinema, where the restaurant at Yarraville is as well. Thanks for your time, boys. Keep enjoying the Dogs and also North Melbourne. You can catch this podcast and all other podcasts for Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures on Spotify and all relevant social media platforms. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Scotty.
Thanks, boys.